All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going way back, like way back. We're talking about Adam and Eve.
The original power couple.
Yeah. We're looking at a segment from another show that focused on the book of Genesis, and their take on Adam and Eve is, well, let's just say it's a little different.
Definitely a unique perspective.
It is. Okay, so picture this.
Yeah.
The Garden of Eden. You've got Adam, created from, as the Bible says, the dust of the ground. Pretty wild, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, talk about humble beginnings, right? I think that image is what's so striking about it. It's simple, but it's powerful.
And it's something that people have connected with for, like, forever.
Exactly. Across so many different cultures and time periods, the idea of being connected to the earth, to nature, it's a really universal concept.
Totally. Okay, so you've got Adam hanging out in the garden, and God's like, okay, it's time to spice things up. And how does he create Eve?
Ah, yes, the infamous rib.
From the rib. And the show actually uses the sound effect, like almost like you're hearing surgical tools.
I remember that. It was pretty funny, actually.
It was. But, it makes you think, right? Like, creating Eve from Adam's rib, it's such a specific detail.
It is, and it's something that scholars have debated for centuries. I mean, even the Hebrew word that gets translated as rib, some argue it could also mean side.
Interesting. What would that change then?
Well, instead of a hierarchy with Adam being created first, then Eve from him, side, could imply more of a sense of partnership, equality from the get-go.
Wow, I never thought about that. That totally changes the dynamic. Speaking of dynamics, this show doesn't shy away from humor. They actually have the host joke about Adam wanting a return policy when Eve shows up.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part.
I mean, can you imagine?
Well, on the surface, it's a funny line. But it actually might say something about how relationships were viewed, even way back then.
Oh, totally.
Like, this idea of a return policy maybe plays on those worries about marriage, about the roles that men and women were expected to fill. And these expectations, let's be honest, they weren't exactly invented yesterday.
It's like those expectations, that pressure. It's almost like it was just like built in right from the start.
Exactly.
Kind of like how every relationship these days seems to end up being, it's complicated.
Right. I mean, you always hear people saying that it's complicated, but maybe it's always been that way. Maybe Adam and Eve were the first ones to live that.
Maybe they were. But seriously, it makes you realize why this whole Adam and Eve story has stuck around so long. It's not just about, like, the first man and woman. It's about all of us and how we relate to each other.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something in there about how we relate to, to God, to faith, to something bigger than ourselves.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So, like, how have people interpreted this whole thing over time? I mean, it's such a loaded story.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, one way people have looked at it is about, like you were saying, the whole dynamic between men and women, like all the good stuff, the not so good stuff, the challenges, the joys, all of it.
It's like the blueprint.
In a way, yeah. But then there's also the whole metaphor angle, like maybe Adam and Eve's relationship, their connection to God, their disobedience. Maybe it's all a reflection of our relationship with faith, our own struggles, our own search for forgiveness.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, how this one story from so long ago can still be so relevant.
It speaks to something universal, right?
Yeah.
Some shared human experience. So, I mean, what about you? What stands out to you most about this take on Adam and Eve?
I think what really works is the humor. Like, don't get me wrong, the analysis, the deep dive into the meaning, it's all fascinating,
Yeah.
but it's the humor that makes it click for me. It makes
Yeah.
it feel less like some, like, ancient text and more relatable,
Mhm.
It reminds you that these were people too.
Exactly. I mean, they might be the first ones, but they were dealing with some of the same questions about relationships, about faith, about life that we still grapple with today.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And you know what? It kind of makes you wonder if Adam and Eve's relationship, with all the return policy jokes and all, if that's where it all started, does that make all of human history like one giant, it's complicated family drama?
Well, that's a question for the ages.
Something to think about. All right, everybody, that's another deep dive done. Thanks for listening.